Oh, thank you so much, Janet and Randy and Jay and Leora. It's wonderful to be with you all again. And I remember so well being with you in person several times in Vancouver. So I'm eager to share some things with you today. And I'd like to start with a meditation, which is a poem of mine. And I'll read it twice, and then Jay and Laura will follow with a beautiful musical selection, and then I'll move into my talk. So if you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. You don't have to, but just simply be in your center as best you can in this troubled yet essential time. This poem is called Below Our Strangeness. My soul tells me we were all broken from the same nameless heart, and everything wakes with a piece of that original heart aching its way into blossom. This is why we know each other below our strangeness, why when we fall we lift each other, or when in pain we hold each other, why sudden with joy we dance together. Life is the many pieces of that great heart loving itself back together. Below our strangeness, my soul tells me we were all broken from the same nameless heart, and everything wakes with a piece of that original heart aching its way into blossom. This is why we know each other below our strangeness, why when we fall we lift each other, or when in pain we hold each other, why sudden with joy we dance and sing together. Life is the many pieces of that great heart loving itself back together. Thank you so much. What a touching piece of music, made all the more so because it's coming through you too. So yes, I'd love to share some things with you this morning. What a time we find ourselves in. Just remarkable. And of course, those of you we've been together before, I have no answers. I'm simply sharing the notes that I have from being here. And I know in the depth of me, they live in the depth of you, because at the center we are the same. And I believe more than ever, we are more together than alone. And so I want to start with some of the echoes I've been feeling. I'm 69, and many of you know from my work and when we were together that in my 30s, I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma, and so blessed to be here at all. And I was surprised, though I shouldn't have been, that in the last few months, what I have been feeling emotionally, that we are all going through as one humanity, echoes a lot of what I went through during my cancer journey. And the first thing that really comes to heart and mind is that, all those years ago when I first went to get diagnosed, and of course I was stunned. I said, this must be somebody else that's being called to go to the doctor. I really feel fine. So what's going on here? And I walked into that doctor's office. I was diagnosed, and when I left, the door I had come in through was gone. There was no way to return to the life that was mine up until a half hour before I heard that doctor say you had cancer. And I feel this has happened to us as a human family on the earth at this time. The door to the old world is gone. Oh, there may be some things that may resemble how we gather eventually, or what we do, um, but there's no going back. And that engenders a whole host of feelings, as it did for me all those years ago. So immediately I feel, we're cast into, my God, what does that mean? And we don't know. We don't know. We're going to discover together. Um, but what's remarkable is it engenders loss and grief and confusion, and yet there's still wonder and beauty and miracle and song, as we just heard, that stirs our soul. So the only thing that I'm sure of, as I was then, is that our heart has been permanently enlarged. There is more space in our heart now than there was 2 months ago. And we are called to live into that new space, and say, what is this? And what does it mean to be alive? And to add that to our experience within us and between us. The great Danish philosopher Kierkegaard said, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. And he didn't mean like the anxiety of like, I'm going to go to the dentist and I really don't want to go. And I think he meant more the anxiety of equilibrium of finding ourselves in an unknown space. Imagine a baby bird, a fledgling. Now, we know that they're meant to fly, so it's no big deal. Oh, it's a baby bird. But for the baby bird, it doesn't know what it's supposed to do. And actually, the parent birds just, when it's time, they just push them out of the nest. So imagine that baby bird starts to fall. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, and what am I doing? Why'd they do that? What's going on? And they, out of desperation, they start waving their wings, and oh, I see. This is what I'm supposed to do. So I think we're in that state of disequilibrium. We're in that state of anxiety en route to a freedom we have yet to imagine and yet to inhabit. And I find also that what does that mean? That means we have to be gentle with ourselves. That means we have to expect that we are going to feel a host and range of emotions that we didn't feel so quickly before. And to let those emotions not alarm us, but to be our teachers. I think we all, maybe some of you remember that, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the great pioneer of hospice work, really, and she came upon and articulated the stages of grief. And they don't really, while they're voiced, because one word follows another, they have to be voiced in order. But she said, no, these can happen. They all don't happen to everyone, and they don't happen in the same order, and we skip around. But this is the constellation of deep feelings that visits us when we experience loss and deep change. And they are denial, anger, bartering, depression, and acceptance. And, I have to say, especially in the first month of being sheltered in place, yeah, I felt all of those. I felt all of those. I felt, and really grieved, those of you who have been with me in Circle, being with you in person is my lifeblood. I just, there's nothing that feeds my soul more. And so, all of a sudden, we can't do this. Oh my God. And there's great loss. Will I ever be able to do it again? And yet here we are. And I can see your faces. And I could feel your presence. And I could feel the song and the singing and the piano playing. And so, yeah, I guess we can do it. But that doesn't minimize the grief, because the old world is gone. And I see, certainly in America, and I don't know if you're experiencing it in Canada, but there are pockets of our community, our society in America, who are stuck in these different stages of grief. There are pockets that are stuck in denial, running out into bars and restaurants as if nothing had changed. There are those in anger, protesting again in state capitals. Protesting what? Biology? Protest, it's like a teenager protesting their parents because they're giving them their medicine. Um, and bartering, we all barter. We barter with God. Oh, please, get me out of this, and I'll be a much holier person. So all that to say that we have to be gentle with ourselves and realize that our expanded hearts will feel more, and will feel more at once, and feel more bouncing around of emotion as we start to inhabit our heart in a more full way. And one of the things that did also echo to me from my cancer journey was, cancer is just a disease. There's nothing glorious about it. And it certainly doesn't have to be a life-threatening situation that opens us to the depth of spirit. But for me, it was. For me, 30 or more than 30 years ago, it turned me inside out and upside down, and I was thankfully never the same. But it could have just as well been beauty or wonder or being unconditionally loved for the very first time. It doesn't have to be, we are led into depth by beauty and truth, and by difficulty and suffering. Great love and great suffering are the great transformers. And so, but what I do know is that what is opened in us is always more important than what opens us. And so, cancer just opened me. And so now, too, this pandemic is opening all of humanity. And the question is, what will we be opened to? And that remains to be seen. We are being forced to stop. It's interesting. I don't know, some of you may know the work of Wayne Muller, who years ago wrote a classic book on the Sabbath. And the touchstone in that book was that in the Jewish tradition, the definition of the word Sabbath, it means the one day we don't turn one thing into another. We leave things alone and see the sacredness in them. And, we just stop. And God appears in everything. And we have been forced into a global Sabbath. We have been forced to stop turning one thing into another. We have been forced to stop running from here to there and shopping and bending and manipulating and working at this and trying to make it that, and stop. And the first thing that's clear is that even though we're physically in our homes, we are all connected. We are all connected. And, in the Hindu tradition, all the traditions speak of this, where two or more are gathered, in the Christian tradition. In the Hindu tradition, there's a classic saying, "Thou art that," which is the whole basis of the Hindu ethic, which says, whatever it is, thou art that. We are each other, and what happens to one happens to all. And now that's not just an idea. When you shelter in place, when you wear a mask, when you wash your hands, you are not only caring for yourself, you're caring for me. You're caring for everyone. Thou art that. This has become very real. And so, why? Well, let's look at one body, one human body, my body, your body. So in a very simple way, as long as I have more healthy cells than diseased cells, I'm considered healthy. Even if it's one, I want a lot more, but as long as it's one, I'm healthy. Well, humanity is a global body. And every one of us is a cell. Every soul is a cell in the global body. So you don't just take care of your soul for you. You are working to keep the global body healthy, so that there are more healthy souls than diseased souls. So this all goes together. I was struck in reflecting on, months ago, somewhere in January, December, who knows exactly where, under this noise of this human hive that is our humanity, under all of the non-Sabbath activity, that was going on, somewhere underneath in the silent fabric of existence, one atom shifted in its relationship with the atoms around it, and the coronavirus was created and has been spreading like a fire all over the earth. And it's brought up in me the belief that we need love to move as quickly as disease. We need give to move as quickly as take. We need care to move as quickly as confusion. And therefore, as all the spiritual traditions speak, there is no time for hesitation. We have to love, care, give now. Now. And, I have had some people in my life, in their panic, in their fear, say, there's so much happening. This is unbelievable. I don't have time for an inner life. And I say, this is the time for an inner life. More than ever. And a great teacher about that is like a great redwood tree. Or since we mentioned the Hindu tradition, their version of a redwood, it's not exactly a redwood, but it's a large tree, is the Nayagradha tree. And, we all know that even great trees in a tornado or a hurricane can come down, but, 99% of the time, they endure all storms. Why? Because they have deep roots and a wide trunk. And this is why we need to tend to an inner life. Because we need to deepen our roots right now and widen our trunk so we can endure this storm. And that all means that while we're sheltered in place, I really feel we have to grow in place. We have to grow in place. And that means while we're looking to make outwardly as many masks as possible for our health workers, that means inwardly we have to put down our masks in order to grow inwardly. We have to be nakedly who we are. We have to be tender and honest and gentle and loving and strong, because there is strength in kindness. There is strength in kindness. There is so much sacrifice going on. All these amazing ordinary heroes, from the nurses to the doctors to the people who are cleaning those beds and rooms and halls, to the people who bring us our mail, who are stocking the grocery shelves, to our pharmacists who, and at least here in Michigan, who are kindly delivering, our medicine and leaving it at our door. And that sacrifice grows out of a more ancient spiritual ground of sacrifice. Because the original definition of the word sacrifice means to give up what no longer works in order to stay close to what is sacred. To give up what no longer works in order to stay close to what is sacred. And so this pandemic is revealing to us in time, what is it that is no longer working in the human family? What is it that is broken that needs to stay dismantled? And what is it that is broken that needs to be repaired? How do we know the difference? So I invite you to be with that question. What is it in your life that is no longer working? Because everything has changed. What do you need to give up that no longer works to stay close to what is sacred? Not because we made mistakes, but because everything changes. This is the great learning from the Buddhist tradition of impermanence. Nothing stays the same. Everything grows, everything evolves. So I want to talk a few minutes about fear. There's a lot of fear. In fact, I would say the other virus is fear. And one of the and it's understandable for several reasons, and again, this echoes back to me because, when I was going through my cancer journey, I was in my early 30s and I had never been through anything like this. And I was afraid of everything. I was just terrified of everything. And, on a scale of 1 to 10, I met everything at like a 14. And through no wisdom on my part, just because I exhausted my heart, I had to start discerning what I was feeling afraid and what did that mean and what did it look like, because I couldn't endure giving 150% energy to every single thing that came along. So we need to not perpetuate our fear. We need to feed more than our fear, because while it's understandable that we are preoccupied that we can't go out, well, we need to stop and turn around, because that same door goes in. And if you can't go out, go in, because the inner world is more vast than the outer world. And fear gets its power from not looking at what we're afraid of, and from the future and the past. And we have to somehow return to the moment. I've come to see that every day, something, usually from the news, hooks my fear. And it's become a practice while being sheltered in place or growing in place. Today I say, oh, where will it show up today? Where will it show up today? And so there's two things I want to share about that have been great teachers for me. And one is that we need to have our fear live in us and not us in our fear. Fear is to be moved through, not obeyed. If I ask my fear, what should I do? My fear will say, be more afraid. I thought you'd never ask. But I don't ask my fear. I ask my soul what I should do. And I hold my fear as I would a small child, because it's trying to let me know that there might be danger out there. When I was ill, the great Chinese poet Tu Fu, who I've always admired from the Tang Dynasty in the 700s, and I admired him because he was a very real person, even across the centuries. And he came to me during my cancer journey as a guide in a dream, and it was all about fear. Like I said, I was terrified. So in this dream, there he was on a beach with a stick in the sand, sitting cross-legged. So I ran over to him and I said, how do I block the fear? Well, he ignored me, which really upset me, and I got angry and I got closer. Got in his face and I said, how do I block the fear? And without looking at me, Tu Fu raised the stick over his head, swung it in the air and said, how does a tree block the wind? And with that, he disappeared and I woke up. Well, a tree doesn't block the wind, it lets the wind through. You can't block fear. You can only let it through. So there's a few more things I'd like to share here, and then I'd like to offer you a poem and a question which you can be with. I know some of you will be in breakout rooms after my talk and after the service, and so there'll be a question for you to go. But I want to share with you these 2 or 3 things more. And one is, it comes from a quote from the German philosopher Nietzsche. Now, that's unlike a lot of Nietzsche's work. he was very willful in his early work. I frankly really didn't relate to very much of his work. And then I learned about something he said later in life when he had softened and grown tender and realized he was part of a larger universe. It wasn't all about him. And he said, I want to see what is necessary as beautiful, so I can be one of those who makes things beautiful. I want to see what is necessary as beautiful, so I can be one of those who makes things beautiful. I've been thinking about that a lot in the last 2 months because I think it is the anthem of our day. And I've tried in very simple ways. How do I make, I've washed my hands more than I've ever washed in my life. They're so dry. And I've tried to say, with that in mind, how do I turn the washing of hands into a beautiful ritual? How do I do that? And the two other things I want to share, the kind of more along the lines of how do we go about living into this new space in our heart? How do we go about feeding more than our fear and making what is necessary beautiful? Well, there are two things, there are many, but two come to me that I want to share with you today. One is, I believe we are asked to work with what we're given. That's where our gifts show. And that I have found in my life that by working for what I want, there's nothing wrong with working for what I want, but working for what I want has often been an apprenticeship for working with what we're given. It's when we show up and fully love each other beyond our greatest imaginings, beyond all obstacles. And the second is the clearing of confusion. In the new book, I discovered, and I write about this, the word war goes back to an Indo-European root word, wers, W-E-R-S, which means to confuse and mix up. All war and the conflict that comes from it, within us and between us, comes from confusion. So a spiritual warrior is one who is devoted to the clearing of confusion within us and between us. So how can we feed more than our fear? How can we make what is necessary beautiful by working with what we're given and by staying devoted to the clearing of confusion? The clearing of confusion. And so I invite you to think about, is there a place of confusion within yourself or around you that in the next week you contend with your open heart? So let me give you this question, which you'll get a chance to be with later. And if you're not going to be in the breakout rooms, you can take it with you. And then I'll close with a small poem. Since we are all being impacted by this, no one is exempt, and it is transforming us. So in an effort to personalize how this is affecting you and your gifts, I'm going to invite you to describe one way you are specifically being called to work with what you're given, and what in your true self is being brought forward. It's such a joy to be with you, and I am new at all of this Zoom stuff, and I'm amazed that I can feel you. I can feel you through, well, I guess it isn't even wires. I don't even know, like it's like fire to a caveman to me. I don't get it, but I'm grateful for it. But I do feel you, and I wish you many, many, many blessings. And I've always, when I've been with your community, felt great joy. And I hope you can feel your own joy that you give to so many. So the poem I'd like to close with is a stanza, really, and I'll just read it twice. The mystery is that whoever shows up when we dare to give has exactly what we need hidden in their trouble. The mystery is that whoever shows up when we dare to give has exactly what we need hidden in their trouble. So many, many blessings to you all. Thank you for having me be a part of your beautiful community.